cartoons from present and the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, where yabba dabba doo, we like podcasting at you. I am one of your hosts, the prehistoric dum-dum Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever. Who is here with me today?
Why, it's Henry Gilbert, and we're going to have a gay old time.
I was not informed of this. And today's episode is the Flintstones episode, The Great Gazoo.
It's a living.
I just wanted to, that clip is not from this episode, but I really wanted to just hear It's a Living. There's no It's a Living joke in this episode.
I think they were, those were banned from television after they did one in every episode for the first 4 seasons.
But what if a crocodile was your punch card, you know? It's those kind of questions that the Flintstones asked. But yes, it's time for the Flintstones. We're meeting the Flintstones because of a premium patron. Phil has picked many, and this time they chose the Flintstones. Why? As Phil puts it, this is the Flintstones past its prime. The episode that spawned Osmodiar. My sister and I have always wondered how it came to be and how it became connected with rendering primetime adult animation a footnote for the next decade and a half. How did it all go so wrong as to create a cultural void that only arguably the Muppets filled before the eventual rise of The Simpsons?
Dab straight, Troy.
Oh, God. Yeah, there's so much cultural weight with the Flintstones, like as a rise and a fall. And I think, too, characters like Great Gazoo, they were the shark jump before the shark jump got popularized. Like, once people could crystallize Fonzie jumping over the shark, then you didn't need to reference the Great Gazoo as the late edition thing that ruined stuff, or the Cousin Olivers, all that. I think the Great Gazoo is quite a funny one, though, as far as like things that ruin TV shows
It is,
go.
and we'll get to it, but I love how much this character admits he sucks as a character and is wildly inconsistent.
Yeah, I know, and all the other characters like, let's get away from this guy. I hope we don't see him again. He sucks. I guess, what are our personal histories with the Flintstones? It's hard, to be an American growing up in the shadow of Gen X, you can't avoid the Flintstones.
Yeah, I feel like Gen Xers and us kind of early millennials were the last generation to be subjected to the Flintstones.
100%, yeah.
I will admit that it is very important, but I watched it endlessly as a kid whenever it was on. Not like I was running to the TV, but like, oh, the Flintstones is on, I'll watch this because I'm 5.
Yeah.
And I've seen it the entire run like 3 or 4 times, and I never particularly like laughed or enjoyed it, but it was just like background noise. And then like the second like Simpsons and Nicktoons happened, all Flintstones memories were obliterated from my mind. And I honestly feel like as a society, the second they made the Flintstones movie, they're like, okay, that's it. This is it for the Flintstones. We can all just forget about it. John Goodman played Fred. The prophecy is complete.
He did every reference you remember in the character, and then we're done with it. You don't have to think about it ever again. Yeah, I would watch the Flintstones reruns whenever they came on, but this is similar to my story I told about Scooby-Doo viewing, which was they were virtually interchangeable to me. Like, if I saw a Flintstones where Fred and Barney are cops, or where Pebbles and Bam Bam are teens, I knew that those things were not the original show. But I think it wasn't until Cartoon Network got the Flintstones and made it a huge deal that they promoted like, this is unedited Flintstones with the original opening and not changed for syndication. And I think I really got keyed into the differences and the things Gen Xers had been noticing about the Flintstones for decades before my birth, because Cartoon Network made 1 million clip packages about like, here's every animal that does a job. Here's all the times Fred changed his identity. Like, every joke or overused plot point from Flintstones was there. I do also, though, I grew up watching Flintstones kids, eating the vitamins. My brother was more of a Pebbles fan than me. They're too thin. I don't like them. I want a Rice crisp.
You got to eat them fast or else it turns into Pebble sludge.
Exactly, yeah. I'd much rather have Cocoa Rice Krispies.
Better choice
than a Cocoa Pebbles.
A Cocoa Puff is better. It's firmer. Holds up longer in the milk.
I did, when I could see the original versions of Flintstones, I could tell they were better than the Saturday morning versions of them. And I also remember, too, not just, I happily rode the Wonderful World of Hanna-Barbera ride at Universal. And then plus in our youths, there were the TV movies that were like the series finales of Flintstones. Yeah. The marriage of Pebbles and Bam Bam, the birth of their 2 children, and that kind of was the period on the sentence, because everything after that was not in the core Flintstones continuity. They were all just either reboots or spins on it.
I honestly think the one memory that we've all kept of the Flintstones was the classic Christmas commercial for Fruity Pebbles.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
Fred.
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of bad Flintstones impressions on this podcast, by the way, because I've been watching a lot of this lately.
I think the Rappin' Barney. I'm Rappin' Barney.
Oh, right.
To say that was the Fruity Pebbles one I remember the most, and that is what kids, I think, only know the Flintstones as. I mean,
and vitamins.
Yes, the vitamins. I mean, for my mom too. Like, she grew up with Flintstones vitamins. I think she was like 16 when they came out, but they've been a part of her life for the longest time.
I'm just thinking, we're the same age, and our parents are roughly the same age. Like, this is the cartoon they grew up with. This was their Simpsons. But I have some scary math for you, which is easy to figure out. Like, the Flintstones started in 1960. If they had continued as long as The Simpsons has currently continued, there would still be new episodes in 1992 of the Flintstones.
There would. Wow. Yep.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, there were on and off Flintstone stuff, but it was like they take a year off here and there. There was constant Flintstone content, I think, until The Simpsons just really replaced it in the American consciousness.
As a little kid, I remember being aware of my heterosexuality when I was both attracted to Anne Margrock and also Teenage Pebbles.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure what's going on here, but I like it.
Were you a Betty or a Wilma man?
Oh, Betty.
Okay,
for sure.
I didn't realize that was a conversation people had until I watched Red Dwarf did a whole bit about how Betty is the right one. And remember the big deal in like the mid 90s of Betty finally gets to be a vitamin in the Flintstones vitamins.
They replaced her with the damn car.
The car had always been there, and they're like, all right, we're finally getting rid of the car, and it gets to be Betty among there. Because I do feel bad for that Barney didn't get to have his wife among the vitamins.
You are now wed to this car, Barney.
And so going back through all of the Flintstones, just original series stuff, and research for this, it is funny to see it has the pitfalls and the successes that The Simpsons has, but in like hyperspeed mode,
all in like packed into 6 years.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is all on HBO Max, like the entire run of it.
And I got to give respect to Warner or whoever in the archives. It's a really good remaster of it. Like, they actually took care of these and treated them with the respect that I don't think even Hanna-Barbera as a company did with their masters. I mean, too, it's fun to watch them in the versions you could never really see on television to fit commercials in, because they're as long as they were in the 60s.
26 minutes long.
And it also was fun just skipping around through the seasons to see, not unlike The Simpsons, as time goes on, it reflects changing things in society. Like in season 1, they're complaining about Elvis, and by season 4, they're like, these Beatles suck. The teenagers are everywhere. Boo.
Upon watching this for the first time as an adult, I don't think I've watched the Flintstones in over 25 years. I realized, I kind of understand why I wasn't into this as a kid. There are like 4 or 5 scenes per show.
Yeah. Yes.
It is a very slow show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to pump out the footage. A scene has to stay in one place for a long time, and characters can't move around too much if they're going to. And yet, I think that is another reason I did like Flintstones in the blocks of H&B programming on Cartoon Network in the 90s, because so much other of it was like just a shadow of the Flintstones. Like it was or even just a shadow of the Jetsons, like the lesser Flintstones than the lesser of that. So if you got a Flintstones episode, you're at least, you're getting the mainline feed of whatever this is,
And obviously we do Talking Simpsons, and it was impossible to watch this and not just see the Simpsons and everything, from the beard lines to the pearls to the dresses, and even like the first opening, the quote unquote Rise and Shine opening with the Fire Wars song. It is almost like like the Simpsons opening in that, almost at Homer, Fred comes home to watch the Flintstones on his TV.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. It ends at a TV. It's all the same. Yeah. It's Homer leaving his job and it's Fred leaving his job too. No, I mean, and you see in the shorts and season 1, Homer becomes Fred a lot of times, like just in posing and movement, because there had never been anything like that since the Flintstones.
And
really.
He gets a bit Jackie Gleason-y in the first season. He drops that, thankfully.
And then of course the great Gazoo himself, the subject of this season 6 episode late in the series. I think I thought of it as, this was what ruined the show, right? And I mean, I think it is more just the flag of surrender. But I looked up season 1 episodes, and it's like, no, a silly impossible thing happens here of like Fred gets conked on the head and changes his mind, or the Betty and Wilma pose as women who try to seduce their husbands and trick them into cheating on their wives with their wives.
In the first episode, like Barney invents a flying machine.
Yeah,
and like
right.
It's the first person in Bedrock to fly. And then, but if you look at this season and onwards, like every thumbnail is insane and seems to change the premise. Like, well, now they live next door to the Munsters. How about that?
Hey,
and now here's Stoney Curtis.
The Munsters are popular. What about that?
Yeah.
Or like, well, Screen Gems produces Bewitched as well. What if
true.
she comes over? Like that. The episode before this one is Samantha, just not a parody, not Samantha Rock or whatever, just Samantha and Darren are there. And same with then the next episode after this is just, I think it's Rip Van's Flintstone, and so it's just a Rip Van Winkle parody. Like they always love gimmicks, but Gazoo is like, he is gimmicks personified. It's not just that a random new gimmick has to happen every episode. His episodes are Great Gazoo shows up and inflicts a gimmick upon them.
And I was curious, like, what was the last episode? And it ended very unceremoniously.
Yes.
The plot of the last episode from Wikipedia is Fred's grandfather comes for a visit. While awaiting his arrival, Fred finds Grandpa Flintstone's diary, which recalls his army days as the head of Rocky's Raiders in Stone World War I. Didn't even try.
That is so lazy,
Yeah.
man. So there was a World War I. Assumedly, there's a World War II that happened in this world as well. While there's a joke in this episode about their $20 bill having Stonewall Jackson on it, I was like,
who won that war?
Yeah, so the Greys won it? Like, what? I mean, technically, slavery does exist in this world. Those thinking machines are like, they're slaves in a way.
My last prehistory thing is that I feel like both the Flintstones movie obliterated the Flintstones from like culture, but also like once the Simpsons matched the amount of episodes, it was over. Like Poochie was the one that matched the amount of episodes, right?
Yeah. It was the one that surpassed it. It was 166 for Flintstones, and the 167th episode was Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie Show. And now they have at least 5 times as many episodes as the Flintstones. And yeah, I mean the Flintstones now, they appear in stuff, but they're actually here. Let's do the real history. And just like with Scooby-Doo, this is a decades-long institution of animation, a bedrock, if you will. And because of that, I'm just going to focus on the first series and its creation, and assume that in the future we will certainly do, say, Fred and Barney in the Shmoo episodes. If you don't know, listeners, I am such a Flintstone fan, I didn't realize, but I have a cell of Fred and Barney on my wall.
I look up at Fred and Barney every time I'm here.
But it's really only because they're dancing with the Thing in a scene that is lost to time. There's no record of it because the Marvel character, the Thing, Ben Grimm, his cartoons were partnered with a bunch of Fred and Barney cartoons, and Hanna-Barbera animated an opening of the Thing hanging out with Fred and Barney, but they're just lost. Like, nobody taped it in 1979.
If you track down and buy every cell, you could recreate it in your home.
I hope to, just to see them dancing together. But all right, where does the Flintstones begin? I guess I should first say, what is a sitcom? Why, a situation comedy is a format of comedy writing that has existed back to the radio days and then grew onto television. Like some of the first programming on television were situation comedies, often 30-minute long little playlets about characters in silly situations, and hopefully you would laugh at watching them. Like I Love Lucy, one of the first hits of television, was a sitcom, and while there were multiple hits before 1955, I think a lot of TV historians would say it is Jackie Gleason's The Honeymooners that truly transformed what the tone of every sitcom would be from then on, specifically like it being a domestic sitcom about working class married couples, a bunch of zany schemes, and also clever comebacks. And it's built around, just amazing comedic performances by Jackie Gleason and his cast.
And I somehow have gone most of my life without seeing it because there's a shockingly small amount of episodes.
Yeah, just the original 39.
And I think like Lucy is the one that got the most exposure when we were growing up, and like before that as well. But like it was syndicated to hell and back.
Lucy got replayed so much more. Plus, I think there was more investment by Lucy and her family to have 30th anniversary specials or whatever on TV. Well, meanwhile, Jackie Gleason, I think he was less nostalgic and maybe died sooner.
He was more into making skidoo.
Though I definitely remember when Nick at Night got the Honeymooners, it was like, we got them. The Honeymooners are here. The Honeymooners was quick, but it was beloved in its time, and not just by viewers alone, but also comedy writers in America. They all loved the Honeymooners and were influenced by it in some more than others, let's say. So as we reach the end of the 1950s, Hanna-Barbera is doing better than ever. I covered more of their history in Scooby-Doo, but just a quick version. Hanna-Barbera, the Tom and Jerry unit at MGM, multiple-time Oscar winners, major members, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, of the golden age of animation. As that was dying, they transitioned to television better than any of their other friends. And as Disney and MGM and Universal, all these folks were shutting down their animation divisions, Hanna-Barbera is like, we'll hire you, come to TV. And they had figured out a way to make television animation economically that could work with a fraction of a fraction of theatrical budget through planned animation.
That's why you see people who wrote like a third of the Warner Brothers shorts on the Flintstones credits.
Yep. Yeah. There's several people here. I'm gonna have to just gloss over them real quickly to be like, oh, and this person who wrote every great cartoon you watched of Chuck Jones's. But yes, 1958, they had their big hit show, The Huckleberry Hound Show, which was a launch pad for many other new characters, including Yogi Bear.
Which itself ripped off Andy Griffith, right?
Yep. Yeah, just Andy Griffith.
I forgot that Huckleberry Hound was the first.
Yeah, I always remember Yogi is first, but it's the Huckleberry Hound Show, and then they all kind of spin off from there. Like they did the show Rough and Ready, and also Loopy De Loop, which nobody liked I'm not saying nobody liked him, but they certainly were not the hit that Huckleberry Hound was. And once they realized, okay, effeminate animal plus sidekick on adventures, and it just turned into the Funny Animal Cartoon Factory. Same with after, in 1958, Huckleberry Hound, 1959, Quick Draw McGraw Show comes out. They are on a roll. It seemed like the next stage would then be for them to make an all ages appealing animation like they did with Tom and Jerry, which was not meant just for Saturday morning viewing, but it was made to be seen by adults who wanted to see a cat screaming very loudly before their MGM pictures.
Those 40s ones are so loud and violent. I love them.
Yes, yeah.
They're perfect.
Not perfect.
Well, hey, that made is Irish, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
as I stammer and try to find my way out of that
You've
trap.
only seen the Irish version of that made. No, but
yeah. Thomas, what you doing there?
With Hanna-Barbera looking to get into more all ages stuff, that meant making prime time television. And that also meant they'd have to leave behind their 7-minute format of 3 7-minute things together and make a 30-minute situation comedy in that style, which had never been done in animation on TV before. Just as they did with Andy Griffith and Art Carney, Hanna-Barbera would take heavy inspiration from the classic Honeymooners shorts for theirs, which, hey, if you're going to rip off somebody, rip off the best. But you take that idea and transport them to a crazy setting only animation could make possible. Some histories I saw said that, like, they pitched doing them as, like, a Pilgrim family, a Native American family.
Oh, they dodged a bullet there.
Yes. A bunch of Romans, which that one they would do, called Roman Holiday in the 70s, which sucked. But eventually they settle on cavemen for reasons that I'll get to in a moment. But as they were coming up with this idea for the Flagstones, Hanna-Barbera brought together a small team for the pitch, and they started with a storyboard and then pulled together a 90-second pilot that would have the two couples in it, and Fred Flagstone and Barney Rubble with their wives Wilma and Betty respectively. And it had the usual stakes of Fred being a jerk, Barney getting the best of them, and the wives being noisy busybodies as Homer was showing off his new pool to Barney, and then Barney steals a sandwich.
Did you say Homer?
So I probably, if I ever say Homer in here, no, I meant to say Fred. It's just so, especially with Barney, they gave Homer a Barney for that very reason. So the 1959 pilot was thought lost for many years, but then in 1994, Cartoon Network and Turner made a big production of, we found the lost pilot and we're going to air it on TV on Cartoon Network. And so the pilot is no longer lost. It's been found for 26 years now. So as Barbera would tell the story later in life, he was shopping the concept around to every network in New York, 8 weeks long. No one was biting. He just couldn't sell it. Some really hated the idea, thought it would just be a huge mistake. He had his final meeting with ABC, which was a newer network compared to the other ones, and they bought it within 15 minutes.
Wow.
So like, we got this. And Barbera put it as just like, if ABC hadn't bought it, the Flintstones would have just gone nowhere. It would have gone into the archives, and animation history would be completely different, I would say. You got to figure eventually there would have been another primetime animated series if the Flintstones hadn't been it, but
I think there's a lot of wait till your father gets home erasure in animation history. That was another one. I think like basically the second one before The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Well, not counting the Jetsons, of course.
In Hanna-Barbera's hopes were in that one of like, well, we ripped off Honeymooners. Could we rip off All in the Family and make it work in the 70s? The answer was no.
Exactly.
Sorry.
We were both headed to the same conclusion.
But yes, the original title was The Flagstones. As the story goes, apparently they changed that because the Flagstones is the last name of the characters in High and Lois.
Would you believe? I mean, it's easy to believe. High and Lois still functioning as a property. Yeah, I'm actually looking at the Comics Kingdom page for High and Lois, and yes, since 1954. That baby never aged.
Man,
Little Trixie.
See, I could understand Beetle Bailey going forever, but High and Lois, that's crazy. Mort Walker, the original, low key, a very horny cartoonist. He's one of the hornier ones on the page there. But yeah, so it was going to be the Flagstones. They then changed that to the Gladstones. You can find original character design sheets for Fred is Fred Gladstone, and they mark through it and write Flintstone on top of that. And they settle upon the Flintstones and begin production on it for a fall 1960 release. And
by not getting the name they wanted, they got a better name. It's just like if SpongeBob was SpongeBoy, not as funny as SpongeBob.
Flintstones, there's something about that. It's just fun. It's a double. Everything is a rock pun, but what makes them unique is that they are a double rock pun. They are a flint and a stone. And so let's talk about some key figures in the development and creation of the Flintstones. Many people who were like in their 60s when in the 1960s, like Dan Gordon, who was born in 1897. So if you wonder why this show feels like old men mad about kids, I think that's part of the reason.
He's older than Alfred Hitchcock, that guy.
Dan Gordon was an animator, storyboarder, comic artist who Hanna-Barbera had known since the 1930s. Gordon had worked on many Fleischer shorts, and including one in Popeye 1 that I don't think you'll be seeing on any collections from the 1940s. But he also worked on Fleischer's Stone Age shorts compilation, which, get this, Bob, cavemen going through everyday life things with dinosaurs and stuff around.
I don't think it'll work.
And so Bill Hanna, as he put it, quote, Now, you may not get the same response from anybody else, but to me, Dan Gordon is responsible for the Flintstones. He came up with a basic concept of doing it with cavemen and skins. And Joe Barbera would say, the first two Flintstones were the work of Dan Gordon and myself. I control the content, and Dan did the storyboard. So Dan Gordon seems to be a lesser-known figure of the Flintstones, but a key one in how he had done all of these gags of cavemen stuff that they could just redo in Hanna-Barbera. And I mean, Hanna-Barbera would redo a gag every day if they could get away with it. Dan Gordon, unfortunately, he enjoyed the alcohol quite a bit. Even people in the 50s were like, "You drink a lot."
But if I had lived through 2 world wars, I'd be hitting the sauce pretty hard.
Yeah. He's seen a lot of stuff, Dan Gordon. I'm sure.
He's seen electricity happen in his lifetime. Well, at least the radio.
Iwo Takamoto, in his book, he talked about how when he got there, Dan Gordon was just a wreck. His hand was shaking all the time, and he could only really have meetings like in bars. But he said if you handed him a pencil, he would get control of his hand and he could sketch together a great story. And he had other stories too about like Dan falling out of a car while just tumbling out of it while his friend was driving. But he was
the first Ghost Rider, right?
But he was so drunk he just bounced off the road and was fine. He apparently passed away in 1970 in a house fire he caused of his own drinking. So another very important figure in it is character and background designer / layout artist Ed Benedict. He had worked on many of the early Hanna-Barbera shows, and many credit him for developing the house style that works so well in the planned animation. In Takamoto's book, he had nothing but great things to say about Benedict as like one of the top artists in Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, even though I don't really enjoy this show, I think the designs are so cool, especially the original ones, which they lose over time. Like the episode that we're doing is like very streamlined, marketable Flintstones, but if you watch the first season, I just love how the show looks. Thicker lines, like the characters kind of look different in every shot. It's so funky.
I love how funky they are in the first season, and it just gets more together. It is like how on The Simpsons they lose so much of their character over time as they work on it. Yeah, this is a whole other podcast about Ed Benedict, but as theatrical died out, Hanna-Barbera hired him to design the stars of the Rough and Ready show of 1957, and they'd work on Quick Draw, Huckleberry, Yogi, key part of designing many of the characters in that, and even just figuring out planned animation as a work style. He worked very well in that. When it came time to put together their first 30-minute sitcom, he was a key figure in designing not only the main characters and the animals, but also much of the settings. The iconic Flintstone car and home, that's Ed Benedict as well. And it's also worth noting that earlier in Ed Benedict's career, he worked in the Tex Avery MGM unit on some of Tex's best stuff, including the first Bad Man, which is about it's cowboys meets caveman, and it's about the first like evil cowboy there ever was, and it has again ton of the same jokes as Flintstones, though much darker. One of my favorites is the bad man pulls out his 6-shooter and blasts a guy wearing a leopard print sack. And when he turns around, you see that all the holes were through all the dots on his shirt.
A good gag.
Yeah. And also the gag of all the guys going to a burlesque place that is a hole in a wall made of a sexy dame's figure. So obviously with Ben Benedict's history on like one of the best caveman cartoons ever, he brought a lot of that. And also just like, hey, we did this in the cartoon. Could you do that?
No one's going to see those cartoons again.
So a few years into production on Flintstones, Ed Benedict would leave Hanna-Barbera and Hollywood altogether. He'd moved to Carmel, California. And I think that explains too why the characters softened and changed over time. And you can, in general, on Hanna-Barbera productions, you can see a shift from the Benedict style to the Takamoto style as Takamoto took over as the head character designer. Though Benedict would still do freelancing on animation remotely until, or even after his retirement. Like he has a lot of credits on Hong Kong Phooey, for example. He passed away in 2006 at the age of 94.
Wow.
And, I know our guest on What a Cartoon, Bob Jakes, he visited Ed Benedict a lot to learn from him as an animator in like the 90s and 80s. In later seasons, Iwao Takamoto took a bigger part of the Flintstones. There's a whole like Flintstones chapter in his book, but it's mainly about him looking at it from the outside and then coming into the series as the series went on and he grew in seniority there. Another key component that Takamoto points out in his book is Harvey Eisenberg, a man who was in his late 40s when this came out, when the series debuted, and who folks identify as like the Carl Barks of Hanna-Barbera comics, for whatever that's worth.
Animation people who are like much older than us, they have an affinity for these cartoons because they grew up with them, but they kind of hate them for how limited they are. But they are in love with the comic books. I knew this because back in the day, I used to read John Cristofalusi's blog, and he would just go on and on about these original designs in the comic books. And then when I read our buddy Thad Komorowski's book, like John Kay would have these like clinics at Spumco, the animation studio, where he'd be like, draw this panel from this Yogi Bear comic. You're not leaving until you replicate it perfectly. Like they are in love with that.
I just
that generation.
That's so crazy because I do feel like I can read the Barks ones and I totally get it, but I guess I've never given the Hanna-Barbera ones a chance. I also don't think they've been, to my knowledge, archived as well as the Disney comics are either.
Not at all.
Yeah, and also Takamoto in his book credits John Mitchell, Hanna-Barbera's agent at the time, who was pushing them very hard to take the risk on the 30-minute format. He tells a story of Bill Hanna calling Mitchell over the phone to be like, we just can't do it 30 minutes a week. We can't. And Mitchell apparently yelled at him like profanely until Hanna went back to work and did what he was told.
And these were back when TV seasons were like 40 episodes too.
And they had to produce them like there was no overseas pipeline, none of that stuff. Like it just had to be pumped out in the room. And another key figure was writer Warren Foster, who handled much of the writing in the first season with occasional episodes after that. Warren Foster had previously worked at Warner on such classics as Porky and Wacky Land, Book Review, The Great Piggy Bank Robbery. He was a story guy on all of those. And like a lot of other folks who left theatrical for the world of Hanna-Barbera, they joined in 1959, and he'd also work on the Flintstones 1966 film as well. He passed away 1971. I should say Ed Benedict outlived them all by a while, like 2006, 94 he lived too. Apparently, Ed Benedict was like a curmudgeon to his last day, but he's a long-lived curmudgeon. And of course, we were hinting at him before, Michael Maltese.
Yes, yeah.
Chuck Jones is like, I would say, top story guy for every Chuck Jones short, most of the best ones. He also joined Hanna-Barbera and wrote on many of Flintstones, as well as most other Hanna-Barbera productions in the first half of the 80s. He passed away in 1981, and he's a whole other podcast on his own. But it's funny that he's, again, all these. I can see why dudes like John Kay had respect for the first season of Flintstones because it had so many of the classic, the golden age folks doing their best on TV production until TV production got as flattened out creatively as much as possible. Apparently the standard for laying out a whole episode for production was 4 weeks.
Okay.
4 whole weeks. And they had top animators pumping out footage like Ken Muse, Bick Beckenbach, and Alex Lovey. Those were some of the top guys.
It honestly feels like some people aren't being credited on these episodes because there are very few credits, and the credits start so late in that credit sequence. I get anxious. I'm like, where are the credits? Where are they?
Definitely more people animated this. Yeah, I guess.
I'm sure there were like 20 women painting these cells that don't get credited.
That's just the dames that ain't can paint, man. That's you're probably gonna marry one of them dames. If
you might as well credit the typing pool while you're at it.
My secretary wrote this too. But yeah, I'm sure there's lots of unnamed people in it, but those are the big ones. Key voice actors in the show, so many greats. I think it's one of the best voice casts of its time. Like the Hanna-Barbera, I believe it's Barbera who's credited for working with the actors and doing most of the voice casting. Is Hannah who took care of the animation side of things, I heard. But like you have character actor Alan Reed as Fred, good.
If you want to see him play a heavy in a minor role, check out the movie The Postman Always Rings Twice. It's a fantastic movie, but he's in it, and he talks like Fred Flintstone because that's his voice.
That's his voice. He's a one voice kind of guy. I just love his voice, and he has a kind of voice. We say it so many times, like, well, guys don't have these voices anymore because they don't live that life anymore.
They're not breathing in asbestos and just whiskey fumes all day. There's a second Fred Flintstone voice dead. He's dead now,
I
right?
believe
Henry
he's
Corden.
dead as well.
Yeah, he died like 15 years ago.
And Alan Reed, I mean, you see him in photos, he makes a Fred face too. Like he can look like Fred if you need him to, except he's bald. But yeah, and he also is credited as the creator of Yabba Dabba Doo. Like he's the one who came up with it. Apparently a script said Yahoo, and then he thought of the, a little dabble do ya, old commercial phrase, and he turned it into Yabba Dabba Doo. Then you got some guy named Mel Blanc as Barney, whoever that is. Sounds fake to me.
Yes, Mel Blanc. You were pointing this out to me earlier, Henry, in your research. He didn't want to do the Art Carney voice.
I think so. Like you hear him in seasons 1 and 2. He's just like, gee, Fred, I don't know about this. Like he's a more of a nervous little guy.
And briefly replaced by Dawes Butler when Mel Blanc had his famous car accident that nearly killed him.
Oh, yeah. There's stories of like multiple of the. I think it's the season 3 and 4. If you hear Barney, know it's being said from a hospital bed.
Yes.
Like I read a story of Mel Blanc saying that he had to, like, Joe Barbera would come into his hospital room, but Blanc couldn't look at him unless he put his head over him, like, because he just had to stare at the ceiling. He couldn't even be moved. Like, it's honestly, we're lucky Mel Blanc lived like another 20 something years after that.
Like one of the possibly apocryphal stories about that is he was in a coma for 2 weeks and he came out of it. But when a nurse asked him, like, how are you doing today, Bugs Bunny? And he responded with the Bugs Bunny voice.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a good story. And I hope it's true.
I want to believe it.
But Mel Blanc's, he spins a lot of yarns in his interviews. He makes up a lot of fun stories.
I mean, he's an old time, radio improviser. He's a goof arounder guy. Like that's what's so lovable about him. And Hanna-Barbera voice regular Jean Vanderpyle does Wilma. She's the only one who's in that Flagstones pilot who stays the same voice. Like it's Dawes Butler doing, I believe it's Dawes Butler as Fred, it's Barney is Don Messick, and Betty is June Foray.
Oh, wow.
And Betty looks like crap in that one. She's wearing like just a bearskin fur and no bow in her hair. She's not the cute Betty we all love. And that Betty is voiced by, I guess, like the most famous person of the voice cast, B. Benaderet.
I feel like the Betty in this episode is like a fake Betty. It
is a fake Betty. Yes,
I spotted it as a Betty lover.
Yeah. So in the first 4 seasons, it was B. Benaderet. And she was a radio comedy legend at that point. She'd done a lot of cartoons too. She was the original Ethel in radio versions of I Love Lucy.
Okay,
and
cool.
She would have been Ethel Mertz, but she'd already been cast on the TV version of Burns and Allen. So, and she was famous for her giggle. The giggle Betty does, like, that was in 1960. If you heard it, you're like, hey, that's B. Benaderet. Like, that's the famous giggle of that lady. And she was a regular on Green Acres. And then they, like, basically made the show Petticoat Junction as a vehicle for her.
Oh, yeah. I forgot she was in that. That was one of the 3 farm shows I didn't watch.
She would have, she also almost was cast as, I believe she plays Jed Clampett's, she would have been Jed Clampett's mom. Like, she'd have been Granny if it hadn't been going to Irene Ryan. Yeah, but so B. Bernadette, I think I couldn't find out exactly why she had been replaced by Jerry Johnson, who is Betty in the last 2 seasons and the movie, but not Betty in anything after that. I think I can see the timeline lining up with when B was cast on Petticoat Junction. So it could just be she's like, I have a weekly live action show. I can't record weekly this Betty Rubble voice with you guys. Sadly, just a few years into Petticoat Junction, she developed lung cancer and passed away. So yeah, many people from the Flintstones didn't live through the 60s. And if they made it to the 70s, they were lucky.
Yeah, and you mentioned the movie. So, like, in the early 90s, when Flintstones nostalgia was at an all-time high, the movie was being made. I bought a copy of the short-lived magazine Wild Cartoon Kingdom. It had a big, like, feature on the Flintstones, like, things you didn't know. And one thing that blew my mind at the age of, like, 11, like, there was a Flintstones movie.
Yeah,
and it never got play on TV, even after, like, the rediscovery of it. It's just so bizarre that they made it and did nothing with it for kids of our era.
It was really weird how they kept that, and the Yogi movie just like in a vault. I don't understand why they held it back so much. I think maybe it was like a accidental reverse prestige where they're like, this has the prestige of Snow White, and they wouldn't play Snow White on the Disney Channel, so we're not going to play that.
Or it could be like they were working on trying to make a Flintstones movie for years. They wanted to say, this is the first one. Like, well, what about that one? No, that didn't exist. This is the first one.
That's true. I bet you it's like, yeah, it's when you say like, oh, there were other Charlie Brown movies. They wanted you to forget for the marketing push of other things. I saw one interview with Barbera where he's like, I love being compared to the Honeymooners, but we weren't trying to imitate them. It's like, no, that's him late in life trying to cover up his theft. There's Bill Hanna in interviews, I think, was much more clear of like, yeah, we love the Honeymooners and we did it. And like, you can tell everybody was instructed to, you can especially hear it with Wilma of just like, no, be Alice. You're Alice. And Gleason, the story goes that he even contemplated suing them, but he's like, he didn't want to be the guy to take Fred Flintstone off the air. But yeah, I also though think it's I could see Mel Blanc another reason not wanting to do an Art Carney impression, because Yogi Bear already exists.
Yeah, so, we got dual Carneys. I mean, Hanna-Barbera was bad enough, but they did it twice with this character.
Yeah, on top of having like, then it just was more things. Like I found out Jetsons it's not just the Flintstones, it's Blondie. Like it is the Deadwood and Blondie comics.
That surprised me, but then when you told me that, I was like, oh yeah, totally.
It all lines up perfectly. Like it's the same deal. And then Top Cat, Sergeant Bill Go, you have a Top Cat. And you had many Hanna-Barbera regulars filling out the rest of the roles in random roles. Like Don Messick and John Stevenson are basically the Harry Shearer and Hank Azaria of the Flintstones. And Ted Nichols, regular of most Hanna-Barbera productions, was the main composer, predominantly of just stock music played throughout most episodes.
Oh man, every one of these music cues are just in my head. Yeah. Like perfectly, like just inscribed.
When an episode starts with one of those music cues and a shot of the house, I'm like, is this why Simpsons does this? Or is it just the thing to do in a sitcom? But, and of course, the theme songs, both of them were written by Hoyt Curtin and Will and Joe. I feel like it's probably more just Hoyt, but the first 2 seasons have the instrumental track Rise and Shine.
Yeah, and there are lyrics to this, and I looked up like a video of it with the lyrics. The lyrics are so generic, like things are good, things are great, the sun is shining, and things are good. Like that's nothing about this Stone Age family.
When I hear it, I'm just like, this is the opening to the Bugs and Daffy show.
Yeah.
Like, what heights will hit on with the show. This is it. And apparently that was why they changed it. But I mean, the change is definitely for the better, because season 3's and onward, Meet the Flintstones is probably the most iconic theme song ever in a cartoon. One of the top 5. It'd have to be. Like just every line of it, all the shots of the family, like and just hearing like, you're gonna meet the Flintstones, they're the Modern Stone family.
I will say points off for having a very weirdly kind of garbled line that no one understood for a while, like through the courtesy of Fred's 2 feet. There's nothing that clumsy in Gilligan's Island or any of those premise explaining theme songs.
True. And also as time went on, they kept changing the animation in it too, because Pebbles joins the show, and so they got to add Pebbles, and then it's season 4, we got to get Bam Bam. Okay, Bam Bam's in the opening now, and it just kind of grew and grew. And in our memories, we didn't even see Rise and Shine that much as kids, because for most syndication packages, they just shoved Meet the Flintstones into the season 1.
I had never seen it. In fact, in that magazine, it was like, did you know there was another opening for the Flintstones? It blew my mind.
Yeah.
But the ending, I think it also upset me as a kid. Like, Fred just gets locked out and there's no resolution to that. Just like, that poor man.
I like that it has the line of like, maybe one day Fred will win the fight and the cat will stay out for the night, because he never will be.
Nope.
He'll never be free.
You should have strangled that cat in the last episode.
But it's so, just hearing him scream, Wilma, like, the voice of George Jetson is good, but his, like, Jane, stop this crazy thing, not as good as just the scream, the pained scream of Alan Reed's Wilma. And when it debuted, it was hit with poor reviews out of the gates, but didn't matter. It was a ratings hit, and both with adults who like the satire of modern life, but just as would be the secret for The Simpsons, it actually was more popular with kids who like seeing a slightly edgier cartoon on Friday evening television. And so the kids were buying it big time. Famously, the show had early sponsors of Winston cigarettes.
Oh yeah, we've all seen the ad.
It's old news by now, but it's like a cigarette should. It's crazy to see the Flintstones smoke cigarettes, but when you premiere in 1960, it's normal. You've all watched Mad Men, folks. You know how smoking worked then. And then a few years into it, they got more age-appropriate ads like Alka-Seltzer and Welch's grape juice instead, which those get shared around a lot less than the Winston cigarettes one, which it is funny to watch. The best one is Fred and Barney watching their wives do all the housework as they sit around and smoke.
I wanted to mention that kind of material in the show. So
yes,
just like The Simpsons at first was a snapshot of like America, a middle class family in America right after the Reagan 2 terms, and just like what it did to working class families. The Flintstones is such a perfect snapshot. It's a satire. It takes place in caveman times, but it's such a perfect snapshot of like the post-war just like splendor white people had.
Oh yeah.
And also not just that, but the gender roles are so bizarre and so antiquated. And I was watching a few of these. I watched the pilot and this one, and then I skipped around and watched parts of other ones. I was like, boy, sitting me down in front of this feels almost irresponsible as a child to absorb all of these like terrible ideas about gender roles in society.
Yeah. Well, because a man controls all the money in the house,
yeah.
and your wife is a crazy goof who's going to spend all your money and is lying to you all the time. So you got to lie to her back, because what she doesn't know won't hurt you.
I swear to God, like every plot is just like they get into trouble, and then it's like, gee, Fred, what are you going to do? I think we're going to lie to the wives, Bonnie. He's like, oh, it's a great idea, Fred. And then that's every episode, even this one.
It's this one,
even though it involves a magic alien. These dishonest couples, I swear.
More than one episode in the descriptions when I was just scanning through the episode list was the guys win or lose a bunch of money in gambling and must lie to their wives about, like, the second episode of the series. I watched a handful too. Mainly I was trying to watch the ones for all the songs I remembered, like The Way Outs, which that is a wacky episode. But the second episode is like Fred thinks he made the girls disappear with a magic trick.
Yes.
And his first thought is like, we're going to go to a club, Bonnie, and watch some jazz. Them ladies wouldn't like take your wives out for a night then. Why?
I just felt bad for the wives in the show. It's just like, well, you won't let your wife work. Well, she's doing all the work for free at home, but you won't let her work to earn money. So of course she has to ask you for money. She has no income.
But that's how the men liked it back then.
Yeah.
You control every bit of your wife's life.
And with this like working class job, Fred can afford a house in this again the post-war splendor of being white in cave America.
It's Mr. Slade hadn't done enough of a job of breaking the unions at the rock quarry at that time. Too, the show was one of the first U.S. sitcoms to show the married couple sleeping in the same bed, though that was inconsistent in the first episodes. Not every episode had them sleep in the same bed, but they were ahead of the curve then. By 1962, the series was such a huge hit that Hanna-Barbera could even sell the same concept but in the future, and that's a whole other podcast. But clearly, not as big a hit because it was only one season. Even with Eep Op Ork the best song, a better song than any song that's in that's in Flintstones, I'd say. Within just a few years, it not only was Hanna-Barbera's biggest hit, but it helped Hanna-Barbera grow into easily the biggest cartoon studio in television. As the series went on, most of the writers were like, yeah, Joe Barbera loved parodies, aka finding a movie and copying it. And so that's why almost every episode is a parody of something, which, you know, The Simpsons is guilty of that too. If we're going to say like parody's lazy, like episodes like Cape Fear, for instance, count. They're just the same as when Fred gets his head bonked by a bowling ball and becomes a race car driver or a jazz musician. And it
was the original Homer Gets a Job story.
He had way more. Yeah. Basically, when I look at the 6 seasons of the Flintstones, it's like The Simpsons in double time of just how quick it devolves and just turns into like, do you even have a job anymore, Fred? You never go to it. And he gets fired like 700 times by Slate. Though I think, you know, like Slate, Spacely Sprocket, he's much better as a bad boss. I think so. Because he owns a whole giant business, you know, instead of just one rock quarry where he's like, Simpson. And when I say Simpson, I mean Flintstone. Yeah. Skidder. So by the midpoint of the series, they even moved earlier to the 7:30 time slot, again recognizing what a younger audience the show had gotten. Not to mention that in the 3rd season, they have linear storytelling, an actual story arc where over a course of a handful of episodes, Wilma announces she is expecting, she has a kid, she is pregnant for a couple episodes, and then has a baby. Though, I mean, I Love Lucy did it. They're just doing it because Lucy did it. It's not like they were the first show to have a pregnant main character.
Pebbles is more marketable than Little Ricky, though.
See, that apparently the story was that it was going to be a boy. It was going to be Fred Jr., and Barbera was told that girl dolls sell a lot more than boy dolls. And so they're like, oh, well, then of course it's a girl. And it becomes Pebbles, everybody's favorite little Pebbly Poo. Apparently 3 million of those dolls were sold of her to the kids who watched it. So of course another child is going to come in the next season for the infertile couple of the Rubbles. As the series went on, it also had very Simpson-y things of a ton of guest stars, including Anne Margrock and Stoney Curtis. Plus they just make up characters of like, I'm Daryl Zanrock and I run or I think it was supposed to be the Beatles manager was the one guy in that Open Up Your Heart episode. So that was the first time I realized I didn't like Flintstones cartoons as a kid. When I watched that one, the Open Up Your Heart and Let the Sunshine In episode where Pebbles and Bam Bam become pop sensations singing basically a hymn in pre-Christ times. They're singing all this hymn song. But then it's a dream. It's all a dream.
It's weird that they needed an elaborate setup like that.
Just say, oh, the kids can't sing anymore at the end. Like,
just like how in Treehouse of Horror they eventually stopped the framing device. It's like, you're just gonna watch fun stories. It's fine.
At least in the Bedrock Twitch episode, Fred has to like lip sync and put on a wig. You know, like that's a better song. Dude, the Bedrock Twitch, which the B-52s covered for that film.
Oh, makes sense.
But as time went on, the adults started leaving because of all these stupid gimmicks. They were just falling in the ratings. It got buried in gimmicks, which is crystallized in living gimmick, the Great Gazoo, in the later season. In the midpoint, 8 episodes into season 6, Gazoo shows up. He'll be in 11 total episodes.
Well, he's got to complete his mission. Yeah, it's very important.
And he never does. But like you said with that final episode, there just weren't finales back then. You didn't do a last episode. Like, I think it would be later in the 60s before final episodes really became something where they recognized, like, no, TV shows don't just stop. People are very attached to them and they want a happy ending for their characters. And so they would go off the air in 1966, setting a milestone of 166 episodes, which would not be touched for 30 years until 1997 on The Simpsons. So 31 years afterwards. And right after the final season of The Flintstones, they would become a longtime occupant of syndication. Those episodes would be syndicated to hell and back. And the same year, they got their theatrical film, the spy thriller parody, The Man Called Flintstone, a parody of the very popular at the time James Bond, and In Like Flint as well is what they are more directly parodying. The modern Stone Age family would be a fixture of television for dozens of new series and TV movies up until the late 1990s, and that's when The Simpsons pretty much fully supplanted them. Though you still see them in so many ads and productions, and occasionally you'll get movies like their crossover with the WWE from about 5 years ago.
And there was this made-for-TV special called Flintstones on the Rocks, sort of a more adult Flintstones. It was made for Cartoon Network just on the dawn of Adult Swim. It only aired once, but it is made in the old style of the Flintstones by all these psycho animators who love that stuff.
Yes, I really enjoy that. I would like to do that in the future because it was, all of the Dexter's Lab generation of dudes who grew up loving specifically the first season. They wanted to get back to like Fred is an asshole who is like, and Wilma would kill him if she could. Like it's these, but also would let them draw like, hey, let's get Wilma a little sexier, huh? What if she was in a bikini?
And they let John Kricfalusi make Yogi Bear shorts, 2 of them, and also Jetsons ones. They never let him touch Flintstones.
Yeah, I think that was the safer move. Well, I think too the fact that you can see that On the Rocks only aired once. I think and I don't even think it's that edgy. Like they pull punches where they could have gone farther, but even that I bet was like for Bill and Joe, who were still alive at the time, I bet it was too far for them.
And we were still recovering from 9/11.
Oh yes,
it was like November 1st, 2001.
They should just release it on something. It's really weird that the only versions out there are just taped off a TV from its one airing. But I remember watching it because I thought it was like, I was watching Adult Swim all the time anyway, so I was going to see it. But yeah, the original Flintstones, more available than ever. They're on HBO Max in really good remasters, and they got quality DVD box sets as well because they were early in the now Warner. I just bought a Warner DVD and it was $5, so I got what I paid for. But I wanted to watch the Scooby-Doo and Batman Brave and the Bold crossover episode or film, and so I got the DVD, and it's just a menu that you could make a better one on an iMovie of just the name of it, like play file, and then the movie file starts.
Just autoplay for love of God.
It's terrible. Like that's how little they care now. But the Flintstones got a pretty good collection, including a lot of extras that were very helpful in the creation of these notes. But yeah, that's the history of original Flintstones. I'm sure in the future we'll get to other Flintstones. But when we come back, we are going to be talking about the season 6 series killer episode, The Great Gazoo.
Work hard, don't they, Barney?
Yeah? I hate to see them work so hard.
Yeah, me too. Let's go around back where we can't see them.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred.
Okay. How's about taking a nap?
I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break.
That's it. Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack. Winston's got that filter blend.
Yeah, Fred. Filter blend makes the big taste difference, and only Winston has it up front where it counts. Here, ahead of the pure white filter. Winston packs rich tobaccos specially selected and specially processed for good flavor in filter smoking.
Yeah, Barney, Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
The Flintstones has been brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette.
Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Welcome to the break, everybody. It's Henry Gilbert, or should I say Henry Goldbrick?
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, but welcome to the break.
Everybody, I'm the other host, Rock Burt Mackey. Yes, I'm using my full name for my Flintstones name. Deal with it.
And a big thank you to our premium Patreon supporter, Phil, who picked out this week's episode for us to do the Great Gazoo and talk about Flintstones history. A lot of fun. Thanks, Phil, for picking that out. And we have a big thank you to all of our supporters at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons because they make us able to do this podcast for you every single week.
That's right. If you want to be cool like Phil and get all these episodes 1 week at a time and ad-free, please go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up there for $5 a month. You'll get just that, but also access to everything behind that paywall. That includes everything we've done for the past 3.5 years on Patreon. You get access to all that stuff immediately the second you sign up. That includes all of our limited miniseries like Talking Critic, Talking of the Hill, Talking Mission Hill, Talking Futurama. Our most recent one was Talking Futurama Season 2, Part 2, and that was 9 new episodes of Talking Futurama to close out the year of 2020. And there are 2 new miniseries coming at you in 2021, one in the spring and one in the fall. So you'll want to stay behind the $5 paywall at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons to hear those. And also, we have a $10 level as well. You sign up for that at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. You get all the $5 stuff, but also access to one mega-long podcast once a month just for patrons of that level or higher.
Yeah, Bob, you're talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast. You may have heard the extended free previews that we put into the free feed on What a Cartoon. But if you want to hear the entire thing, you got to sign up at the $10 level for films like The End of Evangelion, which we just did in December. November before that, Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and so many other classics. Over 2 years of podcast we've covered, from as wide a range as Tiny Toons to Spider-Verse to Akira and everything else in between. You will get access to a huge back catalog of podcasts and get a new one each month if you're at the $10 level, on top of all the $5 stuff at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And if you've never used Patreon before, it is so easy to do. And once you sign up, you're given access to a code that you can access anytime you want. You just drop that code into whatever you use to listen to podcasts. And that way you can download all of our bonus podcasts alongside your free podcast as part of your podcasting lifestyle. And there is also an app that Patreon has for any smart device. You just need to download that. You can listen to all of our bonus podcasts that way. But either way you do it, it is so easy to hear all the bonus stuff waiting for you at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So as the Great Gazoo would say, toodaloo, dum-dums, and back to the rest of this podcast.
You watch me get Fred's Fruity Pebbles.
Who are you?
I'm the master rapper, and I'm here to say I love Fruity Pebbles in a major way.
He loves Fruity Pebbles in a major way.
The bedrock yellow, orange, purple, lime, and red. But to get the fruity taste, I gotta trick Fred. Fruity.
To get the fruity taste, he's got to trick Fred. Barney!
Guess that's a wrap.
Most Fruity Pebbles cereal, part of this nutritious breakfast. Yabba-dabba delicious.
Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family. From the town of Bedrock, they're a page right out of history. Let's ride with the family down the street, through the courtesy of Fred and Pete. When you're with the Flintstones, have a yabba-dabba-doo time, a dabba-doo time, we'll have a gay old time.
All right, we are back with the episode The Great Gazoo. And yes, for many, he was seen as the epitome of the show's final, like the final nail in the coffin for Flintstones, going from an entertaining sitcom to a wacky cartoon machine. And I think it's a real infection of what Hanna-Barbera's like just cartoon construction was then, of like, can we give a silly sidekick to somebody?
It would have worked better, this idea. It's a bad idea to begin with, but the character is so ill-defined, and the idea is like anything can happen except when it doesn't. Just like All right. It just seems like so arbitrary and weird.
And then he has to go away because he's sleepy.
Yeah, it's like, what, he's got a sleep disorder too?
I know, and it's like they didn't need him to have silly things. Like in season 2, Barney turns himself invisible, and you didn't need a magic science genie to do that. They just wanted an extra. I mean, clearly they sold Pebbles toys and they sold Bam Bam toys. They wanted to sell Gazoo toys. Like they were really hoping it'd be a big seller to kids.
And the backstory of Gazoo is that he was like a war criminal.
Yes.
Who's like almost he threatened the very existence of the universe with like a weapon of mass destruction.
Though he had a bunch of names first, which I want to play a quick clip from the late animation writer historian Earl Kress on the 6th season DVDs for Flintstones. He has this great history thing I'm pulling a lot from here about the creation of the Great Gazoo. Here's a list of names that he almost had before Gazoo.
The Wizard of Og. I'll give you a few seconds to think it over. How about Rip Van Zonk?
No.
No? Hocus the Pocus?
I still can't figure it out.
Dr. Puckwuck? Professor Ooh?
There you go again.
Oh, I'm sure you'll know this one. Shaggle Bexty Zinkus.
Not a chance.
That last one really,
Shaggle Bexy Zingus.
that was when I realized, like, this is Mr. Mixia's Pitlick from
for sure.
from Superman. Like, that's what
He
they're
goes
taking
back
it
from before this, right? That
Yeah,
character?
he appeared in the 40s.
I thought so, yeah.
And he is also a large-headed little person who can do anything and vexes the main characters with magical stuff. So they're definitely ripping that off as well with old Mixie. The character design is credited in his own book. Iwao Takamoto says, it was me.
I could tell. I could definitely tell.
Yeah, it's why he looks weird next to all these Ed Benedict characters, especially like his helmet is Penelope Pitstop's helmet.
I was thinking of Penelope Pitstop when I was looking at him.
But also like little green men from space were the hot thing then as well.
Yeah, it's just funny how much the alien has been redefined since like the 90s. Now grays are the default alien, but it was like little green men before that.
Even grays feel retro to me, but there's like no thing that really replaced it, I guess. But in the episode, it was written by one of the most prolific writers on the Flintstones and the second woman ever to write for animation, Joanna Lee. And she also in that script wrote that Professor Og came from the planet Vulcan in the year 2000. And that planet Vulcan predates Spock appearing on television. So they didn't rip that one off.
So this is 65. Star Trek is 66, right?
This is 66, but
This is 65.
This is 65.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is late 65. Yes, so it does predate Star Trek by a year. So Joanna Lee, a little background on her. She was a trailblazer for women writing in television. She got her start in Hollywood as an actress. She is in many B movies. She is Tana, the space alien herself in Plan 9 from Outer Space.
That's right.
If you see the aliens sitting at a desk talking about their plan, she is the woman there. So Gazoo isn't too far away from the silliness of Plan 9 from Outer Space. But after that, she moved behind the camera working in comedy writing. She joined Flintstones in season 2. She was also a writer for Gilligan's Island, My Three Sons, The Brady Bunch, and many of the after-school specials that Strangers with Candy parodied.
And as of this recording, we are one day away from one day past the 55th anniversary of this episode airing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, in this year 2020, when we're recording this, was the 60th anniversary of the Flintstones.
There was no celebration.
I know. Obviously, Warner doesn't give a shit to do it.
Bonnie, we've got Rockvid.
Joanna Lee wrote for many years, passed away 2003. And also the final name for the Great Gazoo is taken from a 1909 song, The King of the Bungaloos by Gene Green.
Is this racist?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
I just received a cable dispatch from my ancestral home. It tells me I'm the great Gazoo, successor to the throne. My throne will be a bungalow away up in the trees, where I'll be the ruling monarch over all. gorillas, apes, monks, and chimpanzees, who will be ever ready answer my call.
There you go.
Whenever I hear music like that, either skeletons need to be dancing or I should be exploring a building in Fallout.
In the first lyrics when it's he's talking about like, yeah, I'll have slaves, so I'll have like it goes from there. You can see the jungle imagery plus slave imagery of 1909. You might know where that's going, but calling yourself the Great Gazoo as a leader, that's and apparently in the original outline it's very similar to what then got boarded out. Like Joanna Lee was just she was a writer who didn't draw, so it was in the more Simpson style of a script. Like I think some writers were storyboarders and some writers were typical writers. Like there's a story of Barbera saying they hired somebody who actually worked on the Honeymooners, but their script for the Flintstones was all dialogue. It didn't have any silly things happen visually because they were thinking like live action. They weren't thinking that a brontosaurus could just walk up to somebody. And the original outline also seemed to think it'd be a breakout star. Like it has a pitch of kids are going to love it. Parents will too. Everybody's going to be screaming for more Great Gazoo.
He promises you more of him at the end of the episode.
That 100% is Poochie also.
Yeah.
That is what the character Poochie does, of just like, I'm the greatest and you're all going to love me and you all think I'm great. He's voiced by Harvey Korman, a comedy legend in his own right. He'd go on to be famous for the Carol Burnett Show and Hedley Lamar in The Blazing Saddles.
And I think he was played by Alan Cumming in the Viva Rock Vegas movie from 2001 or something.
I think that's good casting. I think. Yeah. If it's somebody to be that sassy, Harvey Korman, apparently he was like, I don't think I did a good job and I'm not really a voice actor. Like, I think he does fine with the character he's handled here. All right, so the episode itself, it begins with a cold open, which I think those were the first time as a kid I ever saw cartoons with cold opens, and they always confused me as a child.
Me too. I'm like, where are the credits? Like, where's the theme song?
I swear sometimes they were like previews of things that would come later in the episode, like a flash forward, but this one starts the story out. And as many Flintstones episode begins, it's about a woman lying to get something out of their poor husband. These lying women who want him to spend money. They'd spend all his money if she could. This spendthrift Ken.
She's already spending his money on that elaborate breakfast. He bought all that food.
Man, that rock wheat pancakes, those look good. And Bronto sausages. Can't they just be Brontosaurus sausages? Why are they Bronto sausages?
They weren't trying hard enough.
I also love that when Pebbles comes into the room as Fred is going like, all right, what's he planning? He treats Pebbles with more autonomy than his wife, who's an adult.
That's true. And like more like sexist humor is like he thinks she wrecked the car.
Yes, of course. Well, because, they have to fit in a women can't drive joke.
They try to steal your money and they can't drive.
But I do like Alan Reed saying Pebbly Poo will always be very cute to me. But yes, Wilma finally reveals her plan.
A, there's a contest for the fattest husband in Bedrock, and she's entering me. B, she had an accident with the car. C, she wants something.
Oh, Fred, I was wondering.
The C's have it. She wants something.
Betty and I were talking. You know, the four of us haven't had a night on the town in ages. And there's a fabulous new restaurant. It's called the Chateau Rockin' Blue.
Chateau Rockin' Blue.
Every single person we know has been there except us. Have some more pancakes, dear.
Late for work. Gotta run.
Fred, please. Can't we go, please?
Wilma, it costs a week's salary just to tip the parking lot boy in that place. We can't afford it. The answer is absolutely no.
We don't ask things very often.
Positively no.
Please? Pretty please?
Definitely. Maybe.
Aw. And the voice acting is great because you could tell they're together.
Yeah,
like you can hear like the breaths and the movements and everything. It's really good.
It's a key part of why the voice acting works so well in this. Yeah, I think that was something Greening and co really wanted to do on Simpsons as well, to have them do it teleplay style as much as possible, which that I just know that because Yardley Smith did a recent interview about how she's sad they can't do that anymore in these these times.
Well, if Hanna-Barbera could have done it cheaper back then, they would have, but that was just the only way they did it. It was just like, this is just like radio, right? We all get together and we read a play.
And they only have to pay the technician one day instead of having it multiple days when a person can come in. Well, that's also why you specialize in voice actors who have open schedules instead of, famous people who, when famous people appear in cartoons, it's just like, when are they free in their schedule to record by themselves for this show? But yeah, I also, when Fred lists those reasons, I feel like he's talking to the camera and he's like, I know I'm in a TV show. The C's have it. Like, that is he's saying a joke for an audience.
He's letting us in on the gag.
He's already breaking the fourth wall before old Gazoo shows up. I also think the laugh tracks, it was normal back then, but laugh tracks on a cartoon are so weird to me now. They always weirded me out in the 90s when I saw these reruns.
Was this the first one to have a laugh track, the first cartoon?
I think so. I don't think like Huckleberry and Quick Draw did. I think they just did it because laugh tracks were on live action sitcoms, so it was just the thing you did.
I also think the laugh track helps make the show cheaper in that it slows down the pacing. You can add more beats after a joke to like put the laughs in. I think it does affect the pacing in a major way.
Oh yeah, and that's why you can't remove it. They removed him from some Scooby-Doos, and I don't think it's as noticeable because it's just like pause and then they say it. But they add some really long laughs in this that let you not animate Fred for several moments. And I feel bad for Joanna Lee as a writer that she has to sell out her gender so much in these scripts about like, okay, here's the plot. A wife is annoying. And go from there, Joanna.
Like Fred had Yabba Dabba Doo, Barney had that like laugh. I guess Betty had a laugh too, but the wife catchphrase was da 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 charge it. Because with credit cards.
Yes, yeah.
Because women be shopping.
Women be shopping.
Flintstones said it before Sinbad.
Well, and in this case, this feels very taken from being an LA comedy writer of just having a wife who like says all the other husbands take their wives to the fancy French restaurant. At first I thought it was a reference to the Chateau Marmont, but Rockin' Blue feels like it's a reference to someplace called like the Chateau Blibba Blue. But I couldn't find, there's several times in this where I'm like, that has to be a reference to something, but if you weren't alive in 1966, you don't know what it is. Just like how Simpsons episodes have a reference to something that if you weren't alive in 1993, you don't know what they're talking about.
And that's why we have a podcast, because we were alive in 1993.
Also, I like that people just eat off screen. Like, he doesn't say he wants the food at first, and then when it cuts back to him, all the food's gone. She's like, oh, hey, here's some more pancakes.
Well, eating sounds complicated to animate.
Yeah,
which is why much later in this, I was so disappointed. Like, we don't even see the nice food he eats,
or even more butlers delivering them. Like, they cut out everything that could be complicated. And on top of that, we don't even get to see. Again, I said that's why I played the "It's a Living" clip. It's because there's no funny animals making stuff in this. There's no good jokes about like a vacuum cleaner or a shower nozzle or whatever. I think it was Robot Chicken that made the joke about like the toilets of this world.
It feels like 45% of this episode is Fred, Barney, and Gazoo standing in the middle of the street.
Yeah,
it's like a 7-minute long scene.
They hang out there for so long. Yeah, you're right. I counted it too. I was like, okay, well, how long is this? It takes them 7 minutes.
There's an act break in the middle of that scene.
It's unbelievable. I guess it saved him some money though. They didn't have to make too many new backgrounds. Then we get the opening, the whistle, the slide down the dinosaur, the yabba.
He hits the chestnut tree.
I looked it up. That cat appears in 4 episodes total, but is always there in the opening. It's an odd choice. Like Snowball 2 appears far more than that saber-toothed cat does, which apparently is called Big Puss, according to the wiki.
The unused opening, Rise and Shine, which they did for the first 2 seasons, it has like a green Dino in it.
Yeah, well, remember when Dino's first appearance, the reason he's called Dino is because he's a Dean Martin parody. And he acts like, I'm glad he just turned into that That's cuter. He is basically a dog. I think if I have to go tiers of Hanna-Barbera dogs, I prefer Astro to Dino, but Dino's not bad.
I like him.
And yeah, that courtesy of Fred's 2 feet. It's just it was a long time before I knew that. It always bugs me that the Rubbles have to just shove into the back of this car with the kids. Like, you've got your own little purple car. Take that. Take your he is such a beta, Barney is.
It's true.
He really is. He's not to get into that, loaded phrasing and all that, but
low energy Barney.
I mean, hey, he can't get Betty pregnant, and I don't think it's her fault. He's low T, probably is having a lot of soy with his Bronto burgers. Bronto soy burgers is what he's having. And yeah, I think the opening too, they upgrade it from the first one, because the first one ends with Fred watching TV. The classic version ends with them watching a movie.
Drive-in movie, yeah.
I think that's them trying to say we're more prestigious than just some TV show. They then cut back to the boys driving around. They can't even animate like streets for them to drive on. It's just green they're driving on. And part of growing up is realizing that Hanna-Barbera repeats backgrounds on a cycle. And they definitely do in this scene. Like, there's one house, one tree, and one hill. And you just see those three over and over and over and over in a long, long cycle. I like when The Simpsons made their joke about repeating animated backgrounds.
Right. And that's like the cleaning lady was repeated as well.
But the animators on it were just like, no, you made this harder. Like, there's the cheapness. Well, you have to have nothing moving.
It wasn't cheap enough.
And the classic opening is Fred giving advice to Barney that he can't follow himself, like Barney saying, "Oh, Betty was asking to go to this place. You just got to be firm and tell her definitely maybe." "Oh yeah, Fred." Barn is just an agreeable dunce. That's I like him though. I think of the two, he's definitely more. I would prefer to date Barney to Fred.
I prefer if Barney as a friend.
Sure,
he seems very affable.
And he's so supportive. Anytime you'd have a harebrained scheme, Barney's going to help you with it. Also noticeable in this season, Barney has fully black dot eyes instead of the black circle with flesh tone in the center.
Oh, yeah.
Which I don't like that. I like that he had eyes that nobody else had in that world. Having the black dot eyes was apparently I looked up other ones like, okay, what's a recent Flintstones thing? In those, they draw him with these circles that have the flesh tone in the center of it. So they didn't do the black dots. I think they shift between the two in that Barney style. Though also, it's like in the first season, Barney is like even shorter. Like, the shorter you draw him, the better to me.
His design is just so funny. He's just like a tube, with this like Fred's haircut but blonde,
and then his long nose just sticking out of it too. And he's always yucking it up. Barney has a fun time. And so as they're driving and complaining about marital strife in classic style of like, this is just a normal Flintstone setup of how are we going to take the ladies out to a fancy restaurant? Then a flying saucer has to just fall in.
Before they can decide how to lie to their wives.
That I think too, it's supposed to be a little Sputnik-y, the design of this probe, for sure. And I think as they stop and go up to the UFO, maybe it's a flying beehive. That's a bad joke. It's not funny.
I'd punch that one up.
Another take on that one. And then at least Fred has the right reaction, like, a flying beehive. Come on, Bon. So they walk up over to the probe, and then they have a very long explanation of how to get him out of there. Like, that takes like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, pick it up. And then you see where that blue smoke is. Okay, and then there's a flap. All right, and then you move that flap down. Okay, and then you press that button.
And there's no gag to it either. Just like, no, he's just doing what he says, and that's it. That's what's happening.
There should be at least these insulting him because it was like, you guys are stupid. Let me out of here.
So this Gazoo, he's the confirmed bachelor, right? That's how he's playing this guy.
Yes.
You dum-dums.
I'm a bit mad. Yeah, I think, honestly, Gazoo is at his best to me when he's a jerk, when he's just a passive-aggressive jerk. When he becomes a giggle puss.
Not a sleepy, insane man.
Yeah, he's just a genie.
Yeah, that's true.
All he is a genie that they find who bedevils them with wishes. But there's not even the structure of a genie for, like, he'd say, I can only give you 3 wishes a day. It's like, there's several times in here where they wish for one thing and then they say, we should wish for something else later. I'm like, hey, no time like the present, guys. He's right here.
Again, it's the thing. It's like anything can happen except when it doesn't. Because it's just like the rules are so arbitrary, except when he's just like, oh, by the way, I should have mentioned this. Just like, what?
Oh, yeah.
Explain these things up front, okay?
Well, then we're going to be on that roadside for another 2 minutes.
Who cares at this point?
I mean, it's a very cutesy Takamoto style, but I love the Gazoo design. I love his greenness. I love his tiny cape. I think it's the little cape that I like the most.
It's cute. It's adorable.
I like him far more than like Yabble Dabble or Jabberjaw. Like of all the other annoying idiots that. But this is the shit I hated as a kid when these episodes would come. It's like, I don't need an annoying jerk to be around the characters I like. I kind of just want to see the characters have an adventure. But then, once freed, Gazoo introduces himself.
Now then, I suppose the usual amenities are in order. I am the great Gazoo, and I thank you for rescuing me.
Hey, Fred, do you see what I see? I see it, but I don't believe it. Gazoo, huh?
Oh, listen to them, will you? Did it ever occur to the two of you that nature was less than kind? Look at yourselves, overstuffed, overgrown, and a perfectly dreary color. Well, what are your names?
I'm Fred Flintstone. And mine's Barney Rubble.
Flintstone and Rubble? You thought my name was funny. Gazoo, the former headmaster scientist on planet Zatox.
The witch on what?
The planet Oh, never mind.
Yeah, never mind.
Him laughing at like the Flintstone and Rubble, just like, are you just appreciating how you named these characters 6 years ago?
Right? Yeah.
How delightful.
Isn't it silly? I'm in a place with rocks and you're named after them. I don't know if you've realized that.
He's right.
I just also don't like that they have to waste time of like, we're watching the 150th episode of Flintstones. You don't need to tell me their names. Why?
I'm Barney Rubble.
I guess it's polite to introduce yourself that way, but I swear that it must be from a commercial or something. The way he says nature has been less than kind, like that feels like it must have been in a commercial too. And I could only identify one specific commercial idiom they use in the end of this episode, but yeah, I counted it from his getting out of it to the time they leave the street. It's 6 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
6 minutes long. They just sit there, just go like just this back and forth. Fred and Barney are very at first they take it pretty well to meet a floating green man who popped out of a box. We hear about Zatox. Apparently in some other episodes they say it's a Ziltox. So I'm going with Zatox.
Zatox,
here.
yeah.
That's a fun sci-fi name for something. And I think too they don't make it clear enough that he's also a time traveler from the future.
That seems more important. And it's weird that like don't Barney and Fred have the concept of years in their heads? It's just like they can't even say like they can't even make a joke about what year it is.
I guess it asks a lot of questions. He's like, okay, is this the 14th century? They go like, what's a what? Like, okay, I definitely know they know the concept of the number 14. They know what 14 is.
Yeah, you guys have capitalism in this world.
Yeah. So they have numbers, and they definitely know that years are different. Like, they've said things are years. I looked it up that, like, the show is officially in 10,000 BC, but I don't think they ever say it in the show. Like, that would ask a lot of questions if the Flintstones...
Well, who's C?
Yeah.
And why are we before him?
These are things that the dinosaurs show actually explored better. I think somebody asked the question like, why are we counting backwards in our years on dinosaurs?
Oh, you know what? Dinosaur's better version of this.
Yeah, which also just a Flintstones ripoff, but it's all in the family in Flintstones. But yeah, as he explains things more about his time travel, that's when Barney and Fred have a moment to be like, I'm scared. Me too, but play it cool.
He's gonna murder us.
And yeah, Gazoo just making stuff appear out of thin air. It's like, all right, we get it. He can make things happen. And then he explains why he was sent back in time.
Jesus, yeah. I forgot about this element of his backstory.
He built a doomsday machine that could destroy everything that has ever existed. And I do like that it turns into a joke about 60s fad consumerism.
And like
that.
living under the threat of nuclear holocaust too, for people in the 60s.
That he created a nuclear death machine, but was just so he could be the first guy on his block to have one, which is about how like, oh, I bought the newest model of this car. I got the fanciest refrigerator.
Keeping up with the Gazoos.
all the things that white America and the middle class of the 60s could afford and have fun with. Now it's just we show off our newest avocado toast. What's Flintstones joke for that? Like rock avocado toast?
I guess.
That's I'm being as creative as they were.
You just add rock anywhere. It works. Sometimes you get Stony Curtis, sometimes you get rock avocado.
But yeah, Gazoo explains that not only was he freed, but apparently he must serve them.
All but my simplest powers gone.
Gee, that's too bad. Yeah. What was the tiny invention?
It was a little button no bigger than your fingernail. But if you pressed it, zam!
Sam?
Zam! Everyone and everything in the universe would go in one multiglorious, instantaneous disintegration. Oh. Don't look so worried. I never intended to use it. It was a status thing. I was the first one on my block to have one. But they didn't believe me either. So here I am, forced to serve two prehistoric dum-dums until I've proved that I'm reformed.
I think I know the answer, but who are the prehistoric dum-dums you are forced to serve?
The dum-dums that freed me, of course. Ridiculous, isn't it?
Yes.
It just takes so long.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to serve some dum-dums. Now, excuse me, who are these dum-dums, sir?
If it would have been easy to animate, he should have like straightened his tie. Like, so if I understand this correctly, let's get to the minute count here. Got to fill some space.
I'm just going to restate what you said.
It takes so long. I do like that Fred and Barney go between being insulted and then being like bored and then
terrified.
They are right to try to sneak away too, of just like, let's get out of here. This is crazy. But yeah, God, Gazoo, there's no reason for him to be. So who's watching him? Like, are the people who put him there somehow watching him and seeing if he's good to Fred and Barney?
The rules are so arbitrary, and what I like about this scene is like he then demonstrates like, here's my powers. He makes Fred big and Barney small. Then there's an act break, and then after that they're just back in the same scene.
Yeah.
Now you can do an act break and be back in the same scene, but only if something like pivotal happens, like, oh, what's going to happen next? It's like, no, here's just more of the scene.
Yeah.
We just needed to have a commercial.
At the very least, if they're gonna, right after that is when he shows off his powers on Fred and Barney and makes Fred tiny and Barney tall. Have that be like, oh man, our wives are gonna recognize us, and then you go to commercial break. Instead, they don't even do it on a joke that could look like stakes. They're just like, nah.
There's just the flash of black, like, well, here we are back in the same scene.
Like just hearing Gazoo chuckle is not a good, like, oh, I'm gonna watch all these commercials and then come back. What's Gazoo gonna say after he chuckles? I do like Reed's pleading with him to when he wants to be grown back. It's like, oh, great Gazoo. And yeah, so then it's time for their first wishes to Gazoo, which they kind of go crazy with him. Fred asks for $20, which I have to say, inconsistency there, as it has been set up in the world of the Flintstones clearly by this point.
Oh yeah.
Clams are their currency.
Clams.
You should ask for 20 clams.
I haven't heard anyone call money clams in probably 25 years, maybe 30.
It was something when I watched the WWE Flintstones crossover cartoon, which is way better than it has any right to be. I'm not saying it's great, but it's better. They are very consistent on the clam thing. They keep that very together. And it's also like early time Fred and Barney. So they start wishing and wishing and wishing. I also think it's sweet that Barney's requests are for his wife. Like, he's a much better husband than Fred. It's only after he asks for a gift for Betty, he's like, oh, and one for my wife too. Like, and probably because he's just thinking, I'll never hear the end of it from Wilma if Betty gets something before I get it. It also feels like a comment on the 60s of just like, give us all the creature comforts, like all the trash you have in a front lawn in the 1960s.
All the Bronto burgers we can afford.
And as he's dropping off all the things, a cop then shows up, which I have to think Gazoo says, like, bad stuff can happen, guys. I think he made that cop show up. I think he directed him there. And the cop even when he shows up, he's like standing in the middle of the street. I'm like, I don't see any pavement. This is not a street.
They did not really establish like where they are in this scene after they get out of the car. Like, where are we? Like, what's around? Why are there any people seeing this?
And that's when we find out that the cop can't see Gazoo, which is like, all right, I guess we're just making up rules as we go.
Oh, by the way, only you can see me. It's like, you're telling them this now.
Though I did have to chuckle at a 1960s cop. The way they write an annoying cop is that he writes too many citations.
Yeah,
it's not that he arrests them.
Firing rubber bullet at your eyeball.
This cop, like, I was just shocked to see, like, oh, the joke is the cop sees things he thinks is stolen and he's writing a ticket for it. Like, he should arrest them right there.
See that you return this stuff, buddy.
But, you know, I do have to say, Gazoo is on the right side of history driving a cop insane.
Yes.
Why, officer, whatever do you mean?
All that stuff is good. I'll open my eyes and it'll be there again. It's still gone. What happened to it?
Happened to what?
I saw toys and clothes, furniture. I saw it. I really did. I'm not overworked. I don't need a vacation. But I know one thing. I'm getting out of here.
What do you think you are? A comedian or something?
Irresistible impulse.
No wonder they shipped you back.
If I were you two, I wouldn't look a gift sorcerer in the mouth.
Okay, don't get mad.
That wasn't a joke.
But Barney's right. It's like, oh, you torture people. You should be in jail. We shouldn't have freed you. And I also like the cop. The cop clearly like went to the funny farm after that. I think
the little white men with the coats or whatever is the joke.
He lost his pension at the very least, I'm thinking. But yeah, there's another weird bit of like, okay, we're gonna have to go home and show the wives. He tells Gazoo to drive along with them, and there's like a chuckle from the audience. I was like, that's not a joke. Well, he asked him to drive. I don't understand. Or also just, how about you wish him to teleport you home? How about you do that?
There's also like a weird joke where it's like, again, we don't know where they are in like time and space. And Fred, it looks like he's trying to get out of a parallel parking spot. But then Gazoo like snaps his fingers and turns the car around because he was being woken up by Fred's bad driving. But it's like, well, where was the car? We don't see what's around it.
Could we see other cars it bounces into? It's just the assumption that like he keeps like fender bendering all these other cars to get out, but
he stopped his car in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's also, they should still be just in front of his little compartment. Like, they didn't even show a scene where Gazoo makes his compartment disappear. I kept asking myself, like, can't the cops see the crater in the ground? Like, I also like to think that they're just standing in the middle of the road having like coats and stuff appear in front of them and no one sees this until the cop shows up. But also too, as they're driving away, this is when I thought I was like, just ask Gazoo for $5,000. Just say, hey, give me $5,000 right now, or make me a millionaire. Just do that.
Wait until the last minute, Bon. Good idea.
And Gazoo, and then of course Gazoo just has to become sleepy for the rest of the episode
for no reason. That's what drives me crazy. So the rules are bizarre and arbitrary. He is either a sleepy man, a giddy, insane person, or a patronizing, very theatrical, like pompous man. Like he is like 3 different characters for whatever the scene calls for.
I think the sleepy thing, plot wise, it's to get him away from them so they can. But I mean, that too is what's frustrating about this, because the second you see him and him saying like, well, I can't grant every wish, you know what's going to happen. You know that he's not going to come through in the end, and it's going to make them look silly. And you have to wait 12 minutes for that to finally happen.
Yeah, and he can at least say like, "Oh, on the planet Zetox, we sleep 20 hours a day," or something. Just give an explanation about it.
The fact that they bother to explain slight things about like how he traveled in a time tube or whatever is like, oh, I was put in my own time capsule and sent back.
Oh,
like,
Gazoo, you're the laziest man on Zetox.
the design is ripped off from that movie
Oh,
as well.
he is Droppo. He is the Martians from that movie.
He pretty much is old Droppo, though he seems to like candy, I guess. But yeah, so they drive on home, and this is when they meet Wilma and Betty. You know, if I'm Wilma and Betty, I'm thinking that they are lying to me as part of one of the 800 lies I've been told by them to this point in my marriage.
Well, I mean, that's why they're just laughing at them now. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're not going to fall for this. How stupid do you think we are?
In a way, they're viewers who are just like, you guys have had better plots than this. This is not your best lie you've told us. Why? Like, tell us a story about becoming a boxer and winning these, and not just saying, oh, a little green man 2 feet tall did this. I think they should just want them committed. I also think it's part of the latent sexism of the show, though, that they invent a character that the women can't interact with and are thus shoved out of a story.
Yeah, I guess it's like, well, they don't need scenes with him, and then like he has to explain the premise yet again for the characters. It's just like, didn't they hear him the first time?
It's like, no, I can't be seen. And like, I guess that with the cop, they didn't try to tell Gazoo to be seen. So in this case, he's like, okay, what if I command you to be seen? No, it can't be done.
And then he's like, "It's okay, we'll get to it," but it's just like, "Well, only you can see me, but also children and pets." Like, well, what is it, man?
Yeah, and it covers them if in another episode they're like, actually, this person can see me. He has the magical seeing spoon.
People named Howard can see me.
Didn't I tell you? Yeah, it's like in Fairly Odd Parents, they make jokes like that, but they become jokes of like, no, actually, the rules say we can't do X, Y, or Z. But here it's just fairly arbitrary. And then he very sexistly turns the wives into chickens.
Gazoo!
Yes, what is it now?
Oh, great Gazoo, I command you to make yourself known.
I can't, dum-dum. I told you nobody but you could see or hear me.
They're gonna think we flipped. Oh, it's no use, Fred.
Come on, Betty. Another one of their gags backfired.
Little green man.
Can't you do something, Gaz?
Sure. Watch.
Gaz.
Imagine coming up with a story like that.
Gazoo, no! Oh, I want my Betty back.
As you wish.
We'd have to be a couple of dumb clucks to believe such a story.
Oh, boy, that's better.
Jeez. Am I right, fellas?
Yeah.
I mean, we're all thinking it.
I'm glad I feared there'd be a more sexist joke of them saying, I liked them better as chickens or whatever. Instead, instantly they're like, no, don't have them be chickens. But maybe...
I think also like Betty and Wilma laughing at the premise of this idea are just trying to sell it to the viewer like, oh, Little Green Men, I'd love to watch that idea. That just sounds hilarious.
Yeah. Maybe when they're chickens, they could have seen him because they are animals, He should.
They would not think that much about the rules.
I guess, yeah, you're right. Also, the women should be actually worried for Fred that he's going like, great Gazoo, and he's like looking somewhere.
This man is deeply disturbed.
But also, much like how Gazoo just falls asleep when the plot needs to, the women go like, I'm going to leave the room. That way I don't see any magic happening. Yeah, they then wish for Gazoo to give them dresses. So I wonder, like, did Gazoo design these dresses? Did he make them up in his mind to make them appear? Or did he just
what are they made out of?
And did he gift wrap them with his mind as well? And then it sets up that the kids and animals can see him. Honestly, I think it's just to set up again like, oh, if we have the kids enjoy Gazoo, kids will want to buy Gazoo toys.
And that'll I'll kill 90 seconds of this.
I also feel like Dino should be more freaked out by being turned into a giant Pebbles doll, I gotta say. But definitely it's cute to have Pebbles go like her goo goo gaga bullshit with Gazoo makes you warm up to Gazoo just a tiny bit. But Dino's so left in the past now that it's like he already was losing screen time to the babies, and now Gazoo's gonna take the spotlight. Like Dino's not getting anything.
And then Gazoo gets the Bam Bam treatment, which I never liked Bam Bam as a boy because it was the same joke every time. Like, oh, hello there, little man. Oh,
yeah. Like I thought you were. Yeah, the Bam Bamming of smashing stuff, and it's also not even. They didn't make it up for that character. Like there'd been many times in Hanna-Barbera cartoons where a little thing is incredibly powerful. Like I think of the Tom and Jerry one where Jerry's cousin who looks just like him shows up and smashes Tom back and forth. Let alone the character from Rough and Ready named Obble Obble, who just says his own name.
Right.
And he's a caveman kid that Bam Bam is just that repeated with a better character design. But you can see the dollar signs in the eyes of Hanna-Barbera of like the Gazoo, he's our next big hit. Then the wives come back into the room and they have more questions, but are silenced by gifts because they are easily placated.
They are present crazy, these women.
I love that Fred is even trying to make up a lie and they don't care. They're like, I just have a nice new dress. I do not care.
And then Barney's like, save that lie for another time, Fred.
I'll
lie to them in the future.
We all know what kind of lie. And then the way, I mean, too, having Fred say like, who can figure women? It's just like, yep, they're monsters. You can't understand them. They're just needy liars.
They are from Venus.
So yeah, next scene starts. They're on their way to the chateau, Rockin' Blue. I like Wilma's dress. I like her little headpiece too. That's my favorite. Very, very of its time. And when they arrive at the place, I also like that it's a very Ralph Cramden moment of him misspeaking French to the waiter or the maitre d', I guess.
We see the maitre d' and we see the bouncer in this restaurant.
I love that bouncer. He's really of quite a goon.
Alphonse.
And this is when Fred hands him the 20 that he'd wished for earlier with Gazoo. And that's where he says it's Stonewall Jackson instead of Andrew Jackson, which would mean the modern Stone Age Civil War was won by the
Stone Confederacy.
The Stone Federate. By Andrew Slateston. Jefferson Slate Davis. Let's say that. I can think of a better one. Forget it. Anyway, as he gives away his $20, Fred realizes they're out of money.
That was all the money you had. So what? When the bill comes, we'll get more from old Gaz. Come on.
Gaz.
Hey, one more thing. Now what? We forgot flowers for the girls. Hey, you're right. Gazoo! Gazoo! Gazoo!
Now that you've awakened me, I hope it's important.
We forgot corsages for our wives.
Well, that was a red light emergency, wasn't it? 2 corsages coming up. Now, please let me get some sleep. I'm very tired.
Oh, yeah, sure thing. We won't need you for a while.
A long while, I hope.
It's too beautiful. I can't believe we're really here.
And Mama said they'd never take us. When I told her we were coming here, she said to make sure they had money to pay the check.
Some good mother-in-law humor, too.
I mean, mother-in-law Slag Hoople is quite a battle axe.
Yeah.
She had appeared in many episodes before this, but I mean, again, that is very early 60s sexual politics, like the mother-in-law that hates the husband and says you can't do anything right kind of battle axe. But especially that I feel like it's more infantilizing of Wilma to be like, oh, Mama said this. Like, I don't know. But again, I was just screaming, like, ask for money now. What is stopping you? There's no rule that says Gazoo can't give you the corsages and then money to pay for something.
They could have even written a rule to be like, you get one wish every hour or whatever. Like, make it interesting. But no, it's just like the plot complication is like sometimes he's sleepy. And that's basically it.
But they clearly had him awake for the corsages, and they recognize they have no money. Like that, I just don't like that writing, that it's Fred. Fred recognizes we will need money later, and I'll ask for it for Gazoo once we have the check. But right now, we'll ask Gazoo for corsages.
We'll just ask for it at the last minute. It's a perfect plan, Bond.
I guess this just shows that Fred and Barney are not good at planning.
No.
I suppose. Also, when Fred shows up and says, like, I got it from a girl selling them, his posing and the way he says it feels very Peter Griffin to me, too. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of Peter Griffin in Fred Flintstone, and vice versa, rather.
Yeah, I think especially the staticness and the way his hands are at the side, that is much more of how Peter Griffin is drawn than how Homer Simpson is drawn in a resting phase. And I mean, too, I think it's that, Seth MacFarlane was more trained in the Hanna-Barbera house style than David Silverman and Wes Archer and Bill Kopp were.
And he was going to reboot the Flintstones like in the early teens.
Yeah, he was.
2010s.
They were working on it for years, but apparently it couldn't come together. I think it partially was a deal with Warner and Fox, and it was like Warner and Fox didn't want it to get done. And on top of that, it would never be the top level priority for Seth MacFarlane. It was like the 5th most important show to him. But yeah, they take their seats. They have a toast. It's very weird how Barney says that they're together. The Rubbles and Flintstones are together to the bitter end.
And then he realizes what he just said.
I think he has a suicide pact with Fred. He's honestly, I don't think Barn could live without Fred. It's who he's actually close to. Then, again, they cheap out of like they eat during the commercial break.
That could have been like another vehicle for like what is fancy food in the Flintstones gags.
Yeah.
Like show us the fancy food, like maybe have an It's a Living Thing deliver it or something like that. Like all the fun of a fun like French restaurant scene is gone. It's like removed.
Yeah, prehistoric French dining of the 60s. I want to see that, and it feels like they just got lazy.
Here's an idea, like escargot, but the snails are huge.
Oh, God, that's great. Or like an omelet, but made from a dinosaur egg. Or foie gras, but they feed it back to a giant goose dinosaur. Something like that. But instead, they just say, oh, that was nice. And also, you get no sense of what this restaurant is. It's just their one table.
Yeah, it's their one table, and like it doesn't look like the Cave France would be. Just like nothing is fancy about it in the terms of the show.
Yeah, it's not their best interior design. Yeah, the Water Buffalo Lodge has much more, or the bowling alley has much more personality to it. So we do get a reference to Mr. Slate because their lie is that they got a big bonus, and they then are given the bill. It's 225 clams according to an online inflation calculator I read. 1966, $225 equals $1,800 today. So. That is a pretty expensive meal for 4 people. I think the most, when I've spent money that was my company, my employer spending the money, most I ever did was $300. I was like, this feels wrong. But I had a boss who was like, no, we'll get away with it.
Should have stolen more.
I wish, man. Though I'd rather they just buy me multiple game consoles than like, I can eat an $80 steak once, but a computer is forever. Then comes in the obvious thing that was going to happen the entire episode, which is they have a plan and Gazoo then doesn't show up when he needs to. Like, it's just so easy to predict. It takes all the fun out of it.
This has nothing to do with magic or space Martians or whatever. Just like this could have been a plot like Barney and Fred lied about being able to afford the meal and now they can't. They thought something was going to fall through for them at the last minute, but it doesn't. The Gazoo does not need to be part of this plot at all. It's so mundane.
Like they accidentally steal some rich guy's credit card and they're like, you'll never know it was missing, Barn. And then they can't find the credit card at the end of the meal. Would work the same. I think they think there's some inherent comedy to the two of them searching around the dining table and saying, Gazoo, Gazoo, but not that funny. The waiter then shows up and they say, oh, it's out in the car. And he prevents them from running out. I do like the gag that his accent goes away.
That's funny.
And then the women get to leave, and they're like, they mention they have money in the cookie jar, just like Marge does.
Right. Their vacation fund.
Which, I guess that's an easy out, too, of like, okay, I guess you guys do just have $300 sitting around. Sure. But, yeah, they try to run, but a Simpson-style goon prevents them from dining and dashing. And the wives arrive and call them, like, if it isn't the last of the big spenders, which that has to be a saying of something, too. But my Google search came up short, other than a 1974 Billy Joel song, which obviously this wouldn't be taken from. But I don't know. Experts of 60s things, tell me what that's a reference to. But yeah, it's the Fred and Barney then face the greatest indignity a man can face. A woman paying for something you should pay for.
Time for that double suicide.
They are very sad in this. I had a moment of where they're all walking out of the restaurant and you see all four of them in the same shot, barefoot. I'm like, did this show activate a bunch of foot fetishes?
I was thinking about seeing all these piggies on the screen. I'm like, someone's having fun with this.
But which, like, obviously all their feet would be filthy all the time. I mean, they'd stink like.
I mean, everyone smells in this world.
Yeah, Gazoo could be a lot meaner to these people. But yes, the wives are mad that they got embarrassed, and I think they're right to feel that way. Their husbands lied and said they could pay for something. They then have to be humiliated and pay for it themselves by going home to get the last of their savings. And then on top of that, their husbands have to like do the dishwashing to try to make up for it. It's just, there's no reason they should apologize after this. It's really bad that the women apologize after. But yes, as they arrive home, the ladies go into the house and don't talk to the men. They're giving them the silent treatment. Then Fred says, you ever notice the women don't talk to the husbands with the dishpan hands? That's a joke about the many dishpan hand shaming commercials of the 40s to 60s.
Well, guess what, people? Wear gloves when you wash dishes.
Yeah, just have the Dexter's Mom style gloves. But yeah, I looked them up. So many of them just like, you're a wife and it's hard enough in your life, but if you do wash all the dishes, as is your job, your hands better not look like you do that.
Did we not just have dishwashing gloves until like fairly recently? I've only washed I only washed dishes with gloves for my entire life.
Oh man, I don't. I never invested in those. I do give myself dishpan hands.
You got to that way you get the water as hot as possible.
See, it does. The hot water does hurt my little fingies. But I mean, I guess that's also still to this day. Palm Olive, I think, is the one where the logo is a beautiful hand holding it, which goes back to it. So, but yes, Gazoo finally makes himself seen, and he explains why he didn't help the poor little dum-dums.
You notice how nobody says goodnight to the guys with the dishpan hands? Boy, if I get my hands on that little green fink Gazoo.
You called, Buster.
Gazoo, where were you?
When?
Tonight, when do you think?
Boy, do you know what we've been through?
Of course not. I've been sleeping.
Oh, that's swell. You just take off and sleep whenever you want to, eh? Oh.
Well, how can we count on you when we can't count on you?
Oh, it does present a problem, doesn't it? Why don't you try counting on yourselves?
But you said you were supposed to serve us, to give us what we want.
My dear fellow, I'm not only undependable, but I'm a bit of a kook. That's why I'm here, remember? I'm being punished.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Oh, look, I don't wish to stay here forever. And since I am supposed to serve you, I will try. But take heed. Don't ask for more than you can handle. You may get it. Well, see you tomorrow. Maybe.
Shut up. I was angry at that line where he's like, the line like, I'm not only undependable, I'm a bit of a kook. I found that irritating because he's both selling himself to the audience, like, get a load of me, everybody. But he's also saying, I am not even a character.
Yeah.
Like, everything will just be arbitrary and unsatisfying when I'm around.
I'll do whatever needs to be done to make it a frustrating story. Because if his wishes could do anything, then it removes all conflict from the story. It's why you don't make up a genie or you give a bunch of rules to a genie, because otherwise a wish can just be granted and solve every problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. They make a genie but with no rules.
Yeah.
Except that he falls asleep sometimes.
He's a sleepy kook. But I mean, especially when they're frustrated with him here when he comes back, I again was just thinking, like, then just say, you know what, Gazoo, give me $1 million right now, and then we're fine. And then every problem is fixed. But they don't do that. Like, also the way Barney goes, like, well, what do we do if we can't count on you? It's like, well, then you can't.
Yeah,
like,
you just saw what happened.
Oh, God. I think, too, when they walk out of there after he disappears, they go like, man, this guy sucks, right? And then they try to have a moral of the story of Barnes saying, did we do it to ourselves? It's like, no, you didn't.
Who is the real magic genie among us?
It's like, you guys, you didn't bring this on. I know they want to find a moral into it of like, don't ask for more than you can handle. You may get it. But it's like, they didn't ask for any of this. A green spaceman fell down in front of them and forced himself into their lives.
Well, the real monster is the wife.
Yes,
that's the moral.
That's true. I also did have to laugh at the goofy animation of them walking from the car to their front doors. Like, they're on two different levels because they're going to be split by the fence separating them. But it just looks so weird. I mean, it's very
awkward.
Floaty.
Yeah.
There's no sense of where the ground is in relation to them. But yes, of course, that would be good enough as the end of the episode, but you need to have a woman apologize for wanting things.
Tonight wasn't your fault. It was Betty and mine.
I like that kind of thinking.
Jesus.
How come?
Because we pressured you into taking us someplace you couldn't afford.
Oh, but you girls deserve to go.
No, we were wrong, Fred. But thank you for trying to please us.
There's a moral to all this. When two people really care about each other, they have all the magic they need.
What happened to the lights?
I don't know.
Fred, where'd those flowers come from?
A surprise, Wilma. A complete surprise. I think there's going to be a lot of surprises from now on. See what I mean?
Silly. We just have a short or something. Anyway, who cares? Let them stay out.
Wilma Flintstone, I am with you.
A few more of these good deeds, and maybe they'll let me go back.
Oh, that sound sounded like kaboing. Like,
but Fred and Wilma are getting down.
Yeah, a surprising amount of them end with like, well, let's kiss. Like the sauciness of a committed relationship having sex.
But that apology is just too much. Where it's not. I forgot. Not only does she apologize, he's like, go on.
Yeah, like, me and Betty should apologize to you. Yeah, he's right to be like, wait, sure, okay, yeah, apologize. Like, he's accepting it, but there's no like, we pressured you into taking us someplace you can't afford. Like, then maybe they should have just lied. They lied to you and said they could afford it. That you're not the one who needs to apologize.
They're really trying to dig up with this one.
It's just, and also like, there is something weird to Gazoo giving, like, basically watching them have sex. Like,
that's true.
Though
I'm also a bit of a pervert.
Though maybe to him it's like watching dogs have sex. It's like he doesn't get it in that it doesn't arouse him. But yeah, he appears in 10 more episodes after this one. So it's not every episode after. One of them is the cheapest of cheats, where it's like Gazoo teleports them to the future, which is just an excuse to reuse every background they used on the Jetsons and every joke they did on the Jetsons. I should have watched to the end of that episode. I bet they must have their memories erased or something. Otherwise, when they meet the Jetsons, when they time travel to meet them, they should be like, hell, we've been to this place. This looks exactly like the future.
Or it's like a dream or something.
Yeah. Well, especially because the wives get to come too for that one. But yeah, from then on, Gazoo basically doesn't appear in any of the future ones unless for one-off jokes. Like, he's in several Pebbles commercials. There was a like contest of find the box that has all orange pebbles in it and win a prize. It's Gazoo did it. That kind of thing. And yes, Alan Cumming played Gazoo in Viva Rock Vegas. That was like the thing they were saving. Like, let's not do a Gazoo joke in the first movie. We'll save Gazoo for the second one.
God, that movie. I just
But
remember
that works out of time because he visits them in their bachelor days.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. It's a prequel, right?
Yep.
Shit.
Yeah. It's a prequel. It's about them eloping to Rock Vegas, which was a plot point in the wedding movie of Pebbles and Bam Bam, that Fred and Wilma are worried that Pebbles and Bam Bam are not going to have a nice wedding that they're paying for, that instead they're going to elope to Rock Vegas, just like Fred and Wilma had done in their youths. And apparently there's a new thing called like Yabba Dabba Kids, and Gazoo appeared in that too. Like it's one of those things that's not on American Cartoon Network, but is on Boomerang.
It's for the best.
Then we get the classic ending too, which I always did love, like the him getting shoved out the door by his own cat. That's kind of fun, and I love a good milkman joke as much as the next guy. I mean, this show is so old that when they do bowling, they're just hitting milk bottles as well.
That's
they're
right.
not classic pins. But yeah, it's a fun and the singer commenting on Fred not being allowed to come in. That's a good little line, but. Man, a bad episode of an important episode of television about the downfall of a show and becoming worse. But God, Gazoo is so annoying, and there's not even it gets them away from so many of the like at least chuckle-worthy satires of this is like now, but with rock.
It was a very important series. I'm happy we finally got to talk about it, but this is like one of the most infamous episodes of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think it's ever truly like a good show, but it was important for being like the first to do this.
I've heard folks stand by the first season, but even the first season ones I watched, like, boy, this pacing.
Yeah, it's definitely a product of its time for sure.
Yeah. But I thank Phil for picking this. Now we've covered another of the icons of American animation, and it'll make it all the sweeter when we return to like the goofier, weird ones of I'm looking forward to the ones where they're cops with the shmoo, when they're like, you know what, let's just get the shmoo from Little Abner and he hangs out with him.
Little Abner, for Christ's sake. Okay. Well, thanks for listening, folks. If you want to be cool, just like our patron who brought you this episode, please go to patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. Sign up there for $5 a month. You'll get all these episodes 1 week ahead of time and ad-free, and also access to our everything behind the $5 paywall. That includes all of our limited miniseries. The most recent one we just wrapped up not too long ago was Talking Futurama Season 2, Part 2. That was 9 new episodes of Talking Futurama. We'll also have one coming up this spring as well, only for $5 and up patrons. And again, there's so much happening behind that $5 paywall. Too much to list here, but if you sign up at the $10 level, you'll get all of the $5 stuff, plus access to one mega-long podcast once a month just for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
You're talking about the What a Cartoon Movie Podcast, our premium podcast version of this very show, where instead of an animated series, we take twice or even 3 times as long to talk about an animated feature film in the same high-level detail. Classic ones we've done recently have been November's for Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit. The month before that, Hanna-Barbera Classic, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. And in December, I'm sure we did a great one too. We just haven't recorded it yet, so I don't know what it is. But an entire back catalog, over 2 years worth of them, over 100 hours of exclusive podcasts in addition to all the $5 stuff. If you are a $10 and up subscriber at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons.
As for me, I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo, and my other podcast, by the way, is Retronauts. That is a classic gaming podcast about old video games. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, or go to patreon.com/Retronauts. Sign up there for 2 bonus episodes every month. Henry, how about you?
Follow me on Twitter at HENEREYG. You'll stay in the loop on all the Henry Gilbert events going on. And if you want to follow someone else on Twitter, follow the official Twitter account of the Talking Simpsons Podcasting Network at Talk Simpsons Pod. Whenever new podcasts go live for Talking Simpsons, What a Cartoon, or any of our side projects, you will know about it first if you follow on Twitter at Talk Simpsons Pod. So please follow that today.
Thanks so much for listening, folks. We will see you next time for the Amphibia episodes, Kane Crazy and Flood, Sweat, and Tears. And we will see you then.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. They're the modern Stone Age family. From
Oh, well, that's how it goes. Want a hanky?
No, thanks. I have one. Cruel and unusual punishment, that's what it is.
Yeah, maybe it'll help you to talk about it.
Well, there's not much to say. Yesterday, I was the most brilliant scientist in all of Zatox. And today, simply because of one tiny invention, I have been conspired against, locked in my very own time capsule, and sent here to start all over again. All but my simplest powers gone.